Welcome to another exciting episode of Kevjet, the podcast. I'm excited to introduce this week's guest, Canadian singer-songwriter Don Amero.
Born and raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I've been a singer-songwriter now for the better part of 17 or so years. I found music when I was a teenager through my parents and their love of music, and I was infected with that same love.
We discuss his early childhood and how that influenced his now music career.
I grew up in a pretty high poverty neighborhood. I grew up in the north end of Winnipeg, and it's, anybody who knows Winnipeg and hears about the tough things in Winnipeg, most of those stories come out of the north end. When you put poverty and despair together and depression and hard times, crime increases. My friends all around me seem to be dealing with, some sort of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, violence in their homes. And I would watch how they were reacting to it. And what they did is they perpetuated those things that they saw. They also got into drugs, also got into alcohol. And I knew for myself that I wanted to break the cycle. I wanted to break the chain. What I did is I picked up my dad's old Gibson Hummingbird guitar and I strummed an E minor note. It resonated with my heart and my soul, and I felt like music was, in that moment, this new medicine that I found. And it was a really trying time, and music was what saved me.
Don tells us about the time he became curious about his heritage.
I was just a Canadian kid, that's all I thought. But then as you get older, you start realizing, the saying, you don't know where you're going until you know where you come from. And so I knew there were some Indigenous roots on my mom's side, but I didn't know enough of the story. So one day we sat down and I just asked my mom for more information. And my grandpa is Métis. My great-grandmother is Cree, so I often say I've sort of connected to the Cree and Métis communities. And my Indigenous side, my dad being from the East Coast, I always say East Coast Acadian European roots.
We discuss the importance of keeping the history of the Indigenous people alive.
Not to get too political on this right now, but I do think that, or at least believe, that the start of the relationship between Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples was one of peace and friendship. Like the last residential school, I believe it was in Canada, was closed in 1996, which is not that long ago, and less than 30 years ago. And we think this is ancient history, but it's still part of our current society. And people alive today went through atrocities in those residential schools, and I think it's a reckoning of those things. And I'm glad that kids nowadays are learning the histories I worry because I think sometimes young people think they have to carry the burdens of that history. A lot of young people come home with tears in their eyes hearing about how our country operated, and I just really want to make sure that the young people know that they're not responsible for the past, but they're responsible for the future.
We hear what 5 words Don's boss shared with him that changed the course of his life.
What he did say was, "What are you waiting for?" And those 3 words, "What are you waiting for?" That's 5 words. Those words changed everything for me.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy this life story of Canadian singer-songwriter Don Amero. Welcome to Kevjet, the podcast, Canadian singer-songwriter Don Amero.
Happy to be here.
Welcome to London.
Yeah, I'm loving it. I'm staying in a little Airbnb in Camberwell here, and I've never been to this corner. It's there's no dull place here really. There might be, but I haven't found them. It's a busy place. There's people all the time everywhere. Yeah, it's full of life, this place, for sure.
Definitely. There's never a dull moment when you're in London anyway.
Yeah, I'm literally looking right on it. I think it's Camberwell Road, and it's just. There might be a little bit of a lull in the middle of the night, but it's quite hectic all the time.
Yeah, it's not Winnipeg.
No, yeah, definitely. I live in a little tiny suburb of Winnipeg called Transcona. We live on a street like this, but it's about 1/100th of the busyness. So.
Maybe we should take this opportunity to introduce yourself to some listeners who maybe are wondering, who is Don Amero? So who is Don Amero?
Born and raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba. So if you imagine Canada, it's kind of like right in the middle of the country. Actually, if you looked at North America, I would say it's kind of almost right in the middle of North America. It's kind of right center of that. And I don't think the universe revolves around us, but that's kind of where we ended up. I've been a singer-songwriter now for the better part of 17 or so years, full time, traveling all over North America, a little bit here in the UK the last little while. And yeah, I found music when I was a teenager. And, you were at the show last night, and
Yep.
I alluded to how I found music and sort of through my parents and their love of music. And I was infected with that same love. And it wasn't until, a decade or so later when I realized this is really what I want to do. And so I decided to jump in with both feet 17 or so years ago. And it's been, I wouldn't say no looking back since. I think there's been a lot of, I call them white flag moments throughout my career where it's like, I can't do this anymore. I got to give up. And then lo and behold, another door opens up and a miracle happens and keeps me going. And I'm honestly happy to say, the last 5 years have been incredible, where royalties have been good, and obviously it's a money game sometimes, right? Most of the time, trying to figure out how to make this work. And I've been incredibly blessed by some really supportive people and fans in my music world, but also just all around just support from the industry folks who come out and share my music. And it's been an awesome journey.
Let's go back to the very, very beginning. So let's go back to your parents' beginning, because we actually come from the same community in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, my dad was born in Weymouth, Nova Scotia, and lived there for all of his teen years, and then when he was 17, he made a trip across the country, and his plan was to go right to BC to visit his sister, so that's coast to coast, and then head back home to Weymouth. And then his car broke down outside of Winnipeg, and then he got stuck there for 37 years, is my joke. He met my mom that night and had my brothers 9 months later, and then me another 9 months later, and sort of started a life there. And but I've always had this sort of affinity for my East Coast family and my connection there for sure. We lived there for a little stint. Dad tried to make a go of it in the labor force. He's always been a laborer. But as anybody who knows the East Coast, labor and workforce has always been hard, and it's either it's feast or famine, I think, out there a lot of the time. And we have a lot of East Coasters coming into the prairies in Alberta because of that reason. And so we couldn't stay. Dad couldn't make work ends meet, and so we ended up moving back to Winnipeg after about a year. But yeah, that's where you and I are. We probably, I wonder if back then, because we're about the same age.
We are the same age. Yeah.
Would our paths have crossed? I wonder. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Probably have. And I love the story about you meeting your wife in Manitoba.
Yeah,
and maybe I gave the punchline away, but
well, honestly, it's something that I love sharing, because it's just kind of you're right. You did give the punchline away, but that's okay. I love sharing that one because it does catch people off guard, and it was it's about these two girls I used to work with at a cafe, and I really didn't like them. I didn't hate them, but I just didn't like them, and I ended up becoming assistant manager at the cafe, and I got the older one fired, and then I ended up having to tolerate working with the younger one for a while, and I just wanted her to quit so bad, and I remember one day going into work, and I was on a bus, and I just closed my eyes and I said a prayer, and I said, God, if you're listening, if you're there, could you just make her quit or something, or do something here to help me out. And this is no word of a lie. I walked in that day and everything was different. We became fast friends that day, and it kind of blew me away. I walked out of the cafe that afternoon, and I had a little tear roll down my cheek because I had this answer to prayer. Well, it was such a strong answer to prayer that I ended up marrying her about 2 years later, and now we've been married for coming up on 20 years this summer. And kind of one of those things you don't expect when you're going to meet the person, the love of your life, that you meet them and you hate them.
So true. It's not dissimilar to my story, so I get you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it makes for a real good movie one day. I'd love to see somebody do the marriage story of Don Amero one day.
Exactly. That would be great. If you're listening, there you are. The script is already written.
Yeah, let's
cool.
make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. Just bringing back to the first time that you discovered music, and what made you So you discover music, but what made you realize this is my passion?
You know, I was growing up in a home that up until I was about 10 years old, I just thought was just a regular old home, two parents working their butts off to make a living for their kids. I got three brothers, so there was four of us in the home, and it was chaos, as you can imagine. My mom worked a night job, my dad worked a day job, and they were like ships in the night. And as you can imagine, four kids not seeing each other, the stress mounts and life gets hard. My mom, she witnessed a murder when she was working at this bar downtown in Winnipeg, and it was a friend of hers. And so she ended up, it was a sort of gang fight or something happened, and she ended up getting involved, helping her friend, and literally watching him die in her arms, which, as you can imagine, would alter your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in that moment, it causes you to think, life is so short and I'm not happy. And so my mom ended up leaving my dad quite abruptly, ended up with somebody else who was not good, physically, emotionally abusive to her. And I say all this because my friends in my neighborhood were also, I grew up in a pretty high poverty neighborhood. I grew up in the north end of Winnipeg, and it's, anybody who knows Winnipeg and hears about the tough things of Winnipeg, most of those stories come out of the north end. And don't get me wrong, I love the north end. I love the people of the north end. But when you put poverty and despair together and depression and hard times, crime increases. So my friends all around me seem to be dealing with, some sort of alcohol abuse, drug abuse, violence in their homes. And I would watch how they were reacting to it. And what they did is they perpetuated those things that they saw. As they also got into drugs, also got into alcohol. And I knew for myself that I wanted to break the cycle. I wanted to break the chain. And, again, I'm not trying to throw my parents under the bus when I say this. They were loving, kind parents, did the best that they could. But it was hard. And what I did is I picked up my dad's old Gibson Hummingbird guitar, and I strummed an E minor note. I shared this last night too. And I strummed the E minor, and it resonated with my heart and my soul. And I felt like music was, in that moment, this new medicine that I found. And so rather than go down the path of brokenness, I chose music and sports as my sort of outlets. And luckily, that's what I think saved me. And music was sort of my healer and my medicine. And it was getting me through my dark days of watching my mom go through something terrible, watching my dad sort of battle with depression and it was a really trying time. And music was what saved me. And it wasn't until kind of my mid-20s when I realized I got something that's worth offering other people as well, that maybe this could be medicine for the listener as well. And so I began thinking more of music as a way to serve people than it is more about a business or being in the industry of music. I often say I'm in the service industry. I want to serve people with music that will help them in their daily life, and that's what I always try to offer.
And that's very evident in your songwriting as well. The stories in the songs that you write just hit you in the heart, whether it's an upbeat, fast song you want to get up and shake to, or if it's a song you want to sit down and truly just sit down with a candle and a glass of wine. It still hits you in the heart.
Yeah, that's always the goal, honestly. Like, yeah, you're right. Some songs are meant to just be fun and something to move to, and some songs are meant to kind of get you right in the heart and cause you to think. Like, I think listening to music should cause a response, I think. And if you're listening deeply enough to be moved by what you hear, I say that a lot these days. I'm really being affected by this idea of listening more. And as a dad of three kids, I'm trying to train my kids to just shut up and listen sometimes. And, but I need to heed those words for myself and the relationships I have in my life.
You mentioned the kitchen parties last night, and that was something that obviously is a Nova Scotia thing to me. And obviously that might be something that your dad brought with him along the ride to Manitoba. But it was a big part of your mom's life as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, my mom was, she's always been a wonderful singer, I think. So here's the thing. I think my folks really wanted to take music on as a career. I think they had this dream for becoming musicians, but they had us extremely young. I think my mom was 19 when she had my brother and 20 when she had me. So life came fast for them.
Yeah.
And so what that meant was that it just meant they had to get into the workforce really quickly and didn't have the luxury to explore music as a career. But I watched them with these kitchen parties that my dad would sort of just pull out the guitar, friends would be gathered around. There'd be, a case of beer or two. And it was just the love of music, and people would be singing along and requesting dad to play another song. And my dad was a real entertainer. And my mom still got the voice of an angel, I always say. And I love it because I think once I started pursuing music and really giving it a go, I think they got to live it a little bit with me. My dad's been gone now for 8 years. He passed away. My mom's still with me. I think she really is truly my biggest fan. And it's really been a beautiful offering back to her for her to see what it's like. And it's a roller coaster. It's not very structured, not very routine. Families thrive on structure and routine. I'm not able to offer that with the life I've chosen in the career. So it puts a lot of stress on our family, but again, grace of God moments where it feels like we've gotten through a lot of really trying times, always to come back to a place of balance and go, yeah, but we're pretty blessed. And so it's something that we're always reminded of. And if we forget, again, life has a way of poking us, going, wait a second, don't forget that how blessed you are. So
definitely. Yeah. When did you realize how much heritage you had to be proud of growing up?
Yeah, I love sharing this piece because it's a really important one for me. So I grew up in a home where my parents said, "Oh, you're Heinz 57. You're a lot of things." And Heinz 57, for those of you that maybe don't know, is ketchup. It's 57 ingredients to make some ketchup. But so my mom was basically saying, "You are a lot of things," without really giving me a history to cling to. I didn't care much about, I was just a Canadian kid. That's all I thought. But then as you get older, you start realizing, the saying, you don't know where you're going until you know where you come from. And so I knew there was some Indigenous roots on my mom's side, but I didn't know enough of the story. So one day we sat down and I just asked my mom for more information. And my grandpa is Métis. My great-grandmother is Cree. So I often say I'm sort of connected to the Cree and Métis communities. And my Indigenous side, my dad being from the East Coast, I always say East Coast Acadian European roots. And so for me, I have this mixed bag of who I am. I really felt the connection to my Indigenous roots because of where I grew up and because my community around me in the north end of Winnipeg was predominantly Indigenous. And so for me, I very early on in my career, in my music career, they kind of grew hand in hand, sort of my connection to my indigeneity and my growth as a musician and as a voice. They were growing together, and it's part of the reason why I'm here in London. Actually, I got brought out here this week to perform and conversation tomorrow around reconciliation at the Canadian consulate. So it's a conversation to talk about East Coast, or not East Coast, but European settlers coming into Canada and meeting the Indigenous peoples and how that's shaken down over the last 300-400 years. And I got to be honest, it hasn't been all that awesome. However, not to get too political on this right now. I'll wait for that police car to go by. Not to get too political on this right now, but I do think that, or at least believe that the start of the relationship between Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples was one of peace and friendship. But I think very quickly that changed. For whatever reason, it became less about building relationship together and more about how do we move these people off these lands. And yeah, it's a tough part of our history that we're wrestling with now. And I'm glad that we're having these conversations. I'm so glad that the children of this generation right now are having an education about our history. You're right. I don't think we covered a lot of ground when it came to Indigenous and non-Indigenous relationships and how that start was and the truths. And like the last residential school, I believe it was in Canada, it closed in 1996, which is not that long ago, and less than 30 years ago. And we think this is ancient history, but it's still part of our current society. And people alive today went through atrocities in those residential schools, and I think it's a reckoning of those things. And yeah, I'm glad that kids nowadays are learning the histories. And I worry because I think sometimes young people think they have to carry the burdens of that history. A lot of young people come home with tears in their eyes hearing about how our country operated. And I just really want to make sure that the young people know that they're not responsible for the past, but they're responsible for the future. And I think we're doing our best right now to build a foundation that they could stand on and hopefully succeed.
So let's talk about that moment when you were laying hardwood floors and you, in conversation with your boss, I believe it was, said, you know what, I really can't do this
Yeah.
anymore. Tell me
Hmm.
that story.
Yeah, he lit the fire. Honestly, I was all through my 20s, for up until I was about 27. I'd worked all kinds of jobs. I was a security guard. I worked at multiple restaurants as a server. I was a dance teacher for a while, taught breakdance and hip hop, which
Well,
maybe not complete.
maybe we'll bring that
And
up
I
tomorrow night.
and I also I was doing hardwood floor installation. That was sort of the last job I was doing before I jumped into music. And what was going on is I had already been dabbling with playing open mics and getting some opportunities to get out and play. And my boss came in one day and he could see the look on my face. I was miserable. I didn't really want to be there. And he says, what's the matter with you? You look awful. And I said, well, this isn't what I want to do. This isn't my dream. And he said, I thought he was going to say that'll never work out. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be a musician. And then I thought he was going to say, well, don't be stupid. It won't work out. What he did say was, what are you waiting for? And those three words, what are you waiting for? That's 5 words. Those words changed everything for me. I quit and I got in my car and I went coast to coast in Canada. I did about 30 shows over about 6 weeks. And I came home very broke, but very happy, and realized that this is really the path I want to be on and find a way to make it successful. Interestingly enough, that my boss has been one of my greatest supporters all through my career. I've done multiple shows at his house. He told me before I left that if it doesn't work out, I'll always have a job back there. I think that still rings true to this day. If music ever doesn't work out, he'll probably have a job for me. But he's honestly, him and his wife have been incredible supporters to me ever since I began this journey, and I'm grateful for those words. What are you waiting for?
Of course. And of course, you've continued on with your music career with several Juno nominations, several awards, multiple albums. How does that make you feel? Do you feel like, have you had that moment where you feel like, oh, I've accomplished this, or I've reached what I've wanted to do, or are you still setting the bar high?
Yeah, I think I'm always driven to push myself to new heights, and I'm not that I don't think success means becoming a household name. That's not necessarily success to me. Although becoming a household name makes it easier to spread the word. And on the other side of it, like, I think for me, the slow and steady, rickety, broken escalator ride I've been on ever since I started. Sometimes it's shut down, but it's always gone up. It's never gone backwards. I would honestly say that. And for me, I think that piece has been really good for me because it's allowed me to grow into the next season. You hear these stories where somebody blows up and then next thing you know, their life is thrown into chaos. And, like I said, I'm married 20 years. I got 3 kids now. I'm probably beyond the he's going to blow up one day thing, but I do know that for my life, this is what I'm doing. And I think as long as I can gain a handful of people as I go, I think it creates sustainability for me to be able to keep doing this and being willing to explore new places, like coming here to London and again, shaking the trees and seeing who's interested in what I got to say. I want to continue to do that. But in terms of what I've done, so incredibly, it's hard. It's really interesting because I've never done this for awards. I've never done this for I shouldn't say I've never done this for money, but for me, the awards that I've won and the nominations I've got, oftentimes, like, it's so cool. It's such an honor, and I don't want to down talk any of the awards, but I want to be careful, but they're kind of a moment, right? You have it for a moment and you're on the mountaintop, but then 3 weeks goes by and I don't want to say nobody cares anymore either, because people still do care. Like, those 3 Juno nominations happened, 8 and 12 years ago. So they still matter and they still carry weight. But at the same time, it's really about, what are you offering today? What do you have now that people can, what are the needs you're serving as an artist? And that's always what I'm conscious of. And the awards have always been a nice pat on the back, but they definitely haven't been the be all and end all for me.
How important is social media to you?
Oh, yeah. It's a mixed relationship. It's a necessary thing. In case Instagram's listening, usually say it's a necessary evil, but I won't say that here. No, you can share that. That's fine. It's a double-edged sword. Honestly, you have to. I always say, play Instagram or play TikTok. You have to play by their rules, and unlock the algorithms that do the thing to make the thing happen. Like, just because I've got 8,500 listeners or fans on Spotify or on Instagram, people following me, I don't have access to them. Instagram decides how I reach them. I've got 9,000 something on my Facebook. Facebook decides who gets to see those posts. Facebook's engagement is actually still even better than Instagram. But the thing is I'm required to do it to reach those people, and I think being able to stay on top of what's going on around you is great. But it's a mixed bag for me. I do wish there was another way. I believe there's another way, and I'm actually working on that right now. And it might take me a little while to get there, but I think it's the personal connection with people that I think goes the distance. And however that happens, through email connections, text with people. Mm-hmm. I can't text 8,000 people, but I think it's being able to find a way to be vulnerable and personal with people. And you can do it through social media. I find the ones that are most vulnerable on Instagram or wherever I'm posting, I get the most engagement. It's being able to take that to the next level, and that's something I'm working on right now.
Yeah, those are the perks. I think taking the time to reach out to people when they reach out to you, because if they're taking the time to reach out to you, it obviously is important to them to get something across, their voice across, or their thoughts.
Yeah, and I think for me, the biggest hurdle is the time consumption. Like, it's really, being a creative. I'm not playing all the time. I'm not in guitar in hand 7 hours a day or anything. It's sometimes 7 days will go by and I won't have picked up my guitar. But for me, I think there's this part. It's sort of becoming a running joke that if you sign up to be a musician nowadays, you better be hot on Instagram and TikTok and doing those things. And it's kind of a sad state of affairs when you could be the best musician around, but if you don't have a TikTok or Instagram presence, kind of nobody cares. Mm-hmm. And that's a bit of a shame, honestly, that's where we are. I do understand if from a business perspective, if somebody's blowing up on TikTok, well, yeah, you can chase that because there's dollars attached to that. When somebody's got an incredible talent, but nobody's following yet, you really need those business-minded music folks to think, how can we grow this to actually become a viable business? And that used to be the way it was, I felt. I think we're losing that a lot more now.
I think so as well. And that's such a frustrating part. And I say that all the time. We spoke yesterday about your podcast.
Yeah, honestly, I've loved this podcast. It's called Through the Fire. And I've it's a bit of a hiatus right now. I put out 22 episodes last year, and I loved every moment of it. And the conversations were deep and heartfelt and quite intimate. I mean, we were going to the dark places in people's lives where they were going through the fire of something, but they've all come out on the other side stronger and more refined because of these fires they've been through. And I think there's so much encouragement for people that are listening to these stories, and I want to continue to have them. I kind of took a pause on it just because I felt like juggling too much in my life at the same time as trying to hold the podcast. I released a children's book last year as well. And it was just too many things to manage and juggle. And but I do think the podcast will find another season in the not too distant future. I just got to find ways to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. I've checked it out over the last couple of days, and I really, really love the conversations. Tell me about the song Church.
Oh yeah, this is a really cool song that was written by some really wonderful writers in Nashville, some of the top writers, Hillary Lindsay and Ashley Gorley, two great writers. We got sent this song back in, I want to say 2016. And I thought it was cool. I thought it was an awesome song, but I didn't think it was a Don Amero song. And we actually passed on it. And then my manager said, just listen one more time. And about a week later, I listened again. And I was thinking a lot about my dad that day, whom I lost about a year earlier. And it hit me that these themes in this song reminded me a lot of my dad. This song, Church, is about being next to some trees, next to water, being in nature, and that being church, not necessarily being in a place where there's, four walls and pews. And I just made a deep connection to the song once I realized this sounds like my dad. And, I do remember a few times in my life, my dad would often say that he's going to church on a Sunday morning, which usually meant he was going fishing. And when I made that, and there's even a reference to it in the song, right? And so I was making these connections to my dad, and every time I play that song, there is a moment where I can see my dad. I can feel his presence in a way, and so I'm really glad that we picked that song up, and it changed my life. Honestly, that song ended up getting me the record deal with MDM Recordings, opened up a ton of doors in the country community in Canada. And led me here. Honestly, it was the song that kind of kicked open the doors to the country community for me, and made a lot of great big things happen. And so I often say I like to think that my dad had something to do with it from the other side, that he really wanted me to have this song. And it's one of my favorites.
It's beautiful. I'm going to kick into some random questions. Normally, this is where I do like a little quick fire, but I just thought as I was writing these questions down, I thought they were more meaningful than quick fire. So I've written them down. We're going to go with it, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay. Sure.
Most memorable show you've ever performed to date?
There's a lot of really great highlights for me in that question. But I have to say, I had an opportunity in Winnipeg, my hometown, to perform alongside the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. I have 9 songs scored, and with a full symphony. And it's, as you can imagine, I got my band on stage, and there's a 60-piece symphony behind me, and it knocked my socks off. I was, if there's a place that could be as close to heaven here on earth, that might be it. For speaking as a music, my kids are definitely the top on that, but I gotta say that, but playing with the symphony, really has been the highlight of my performance career so far. And, I've had a couple of opportunities to play with symphonies now, and I'd love to continue to make that a thing of the future, because it really is the height of what I think my music has to offer.
Who was your favorite teacher?
Oh man, this one's so easy for me. I'd mentioned earlier I was a dancer. In grade 11, we had this woman come into our high school, Sophia Constantini. She was beautiful. I was 16, and all of us jocks had a crush on her, and a bunch of jocks, like hockey players, football players, joined the dance class because Sophia was there, and we all became dancers. And we started a club back in 1996 called Sisler's Most Wanted. I'm actually wearing funny enough, my Sisler shirt today. And we started a dance group called Sisler's Most Wanted, which is still running to this day. And that kind of started it all. And Sophia was and is such a firm believer in the spirit of people. She, in that season of my life, I was going through a lot of things with my family, I was mentioning earlier. She kind of became like a big sister to me. She knew I couldn't afford shoes, so one day she bought me new shoes. She bought me meals from time to time. She really was a special person that spoke really important things to me in my life. Some big things that I really remember. When I was 18 years old, I started smoking like an idiot. And the reason why I started smoking was because my friend was smoking, and I was always mad at him. I was like, dude, you can quit. And he said, you don't understand how hard this is. And my thing to him was like, well, I'll start smoking and show you how easy it is to quit. What a stupid thing to do. I got stuck smoking for 4 years. I realized this is not something to mess around with. And she said to me, probably when I was about 20, she said, Don, you're a symbol of health, and people look at you and they're inspired by who you are, how you carry yourself. and they're looking at you and they're watching you. And if they see you smoking, you're going to lead people to that as well. And it just gave me enough to go, yeah, I want to be a leader for people to follow. I want to be somebody that helps other people to make healthy choices for their life. And the smoking thing just didn't jive with that vision. And so it was those words for sure that spurred me towards the quitting. So when I did finally quit, I called my friend and said, I quit, you should quit too. So I don't know if he ever did, but yeah, it was a really dumb reason to start, but a really great reason to stop.
What piece of advice have you received that has stuck with you until today?
I don't know if I heard this somewhere else, but it's been a bit of a mantra of mine for most of my career. Nobody owes me anything. What I mean by that is everything feels like a gift then, you know. If you live in this place of entitlement and feeling like, you know, your ego needs to be stroked and you need to, you know, people to feed that. For me, I think it's kept me humble. It's
Mm-hmm.
kept me pleasantly surprised and joyful when opportunities come about. Even this, coming here to London, getting the call to come here to have this opportunity to perform and have this conversation tomorrow, you know, I'm moved by that because I wasn't owed this opportunity, you know? And so that's been a big one for me is nobody owes me anything.
What's a small thing that has made you very happy recently?
Elliot Amero. He's my little guy. He's my 5-year-old. So I've got my 12-year-old Oscar, my 8-year-old Stella, and my 5-year-old Elliot, and they're all awesome kids. But Elliot is now in this sort of like super fun phase and super playful, and yeah, he's just a really fun dude to be around. And yeah, so that's the small thing bringing me a lot of joy lately.
Love it. I'm in your brain, I think. Um, what one family member has had the most significant impact on your life?
Yeah, that's a tricky one too, because I would say my folks for sure. But my wife, you know, it's been a challenge over the 20 years, finding balance, finding peace together sometimes. But she really does call a spade, and sometimes it's hard to hear. But I think her heart behind everything that she shares is really about bringing the best out of people. And so she's called me on my BS, even when I didn't think it was. She's the first person to see red flags, and I oftentimes don't heed her warnings, only to find out that I should have. So yeah, she's definitely been the one that I'm trying to find myself attuned and aligned to now more than ever. And it is tricky, but yeah, I would say she is the one that has a major impact on my life for sure.
If you could relive one moment from your past, what would it be?
This might be a cheesy one, but uh, I did Canadian Idol, so American Idol, but Canada's version.
Hmm.
Uh, I would love to go back to that time and just try something different. I was on the show. I don't know if I mentioned this last night. I can't remember if I shared this part of the story, but I made it to the top 75, and they were cutting it down to the top 22. And I remember thinking, I got this. I can make it to this show. And you know, I don't look back at that thinking that was the be all and end all. But I just wished I had taken a different approach to my time on the show.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, and I wonder if that would have changed things for me. But at the same time, you know, I know these are supposed to be rapid fire, but they're far from rapid answers. At the same time, I feel like I'm glad things worked out the way that they did, because I don't know if they would have worked out this way. And honestly, I'm in a really great place of peace and joy and love and fulfillment. And I'm not sure another journey would have taken me to this place in the same way.
How do you define success? But I think we've gone through that.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I have a great answer for that. For me, anyways, is success is right now. It's right here. It's every day. I think, you know I don't really attach success to things that are beyond right now. You know, I have goals. I have things I'm in margins and places and bars I've set that I want to reach. But for me, success is giving my best right now. And you know, sometimes that means sitting on the couch watching a movie with my kids. And sometimes that means going to the gym and putting in my 3-4 days a week in that. But for me, it's really just about, am I being able to offer my best self right now? And I don't attach it to things beyond the here and now.
What experience has fundamentally changed the way you see the world?
Can I get kind of can I get faithy with you?
Hmm.
Faith talk? Uh, when I was 17 years old, I was with my brothers. We were in the basement drinking beers, and I looked around, and it was another one of those like aha moments. I looked around, and I just thought, man, we are a bunch of losers, like just not. We're destined to not reach our full potential if we keep living like this, you know. And I got up and I went down and I took a walk down by the Red River in Winnipeg, a famous river in our city. And I fell to my knees and I just prayed to the Creator and I just said, help me sort through this. And I feel like that was the moment that I felt a true connection to the divine. And that absolutely changed my life.
What are you most grateful for in life?
My ability to, um, let me just think about that.
Hmm.
Most grateful for in life. Simply good health. You know, my family's healthy. Not really any major sicknesses going on. They may come, but right now I'm very grateful that we're all quite happy and quite healthy.
How does Don Amero want to be remembered?
Ooh, as a kind, loving voice and somebody who everybody felt safe around.
How do you relax?
I don't even know if I do. I actually quite enjoy going to the gym. For me, that's a bit of a cathartic time. It's sort of dedicated and offline kind of me time. Um, Apart from that, it's really is time with my kids, which is not always relaxing, but it is pretty fulfilling. Just spending quality time with them, and I find myself when a couple of days go by and I feel like we haven't had an embrace or like a snuggle on the couch or these moments of connection. I really miss that, so I seek it out after a while. I'm like, Stella, you and I are going to snuggle right now, and so for me, those are cherished moments of relaxation for sure.
Who is the most interesting person you've ever met?
Hmm. Uh, I'm gonna give this one to a buddy of mine. He's a singer-songwriter from Winnipeg, my hometown. A guy named Steve Bell. He's just one of these kind of people. When he speaks, I always leave our conversations feeling sharper, more intelligent, and more wisdom. He's just one of these. He's about 20 years older than me, and he's about 20 years farther in his career than I am. And there's just a lot of wealth of knowledge that he shares with me that I always feel really, yeah, just better for having spent time with him.
If you could learn one new skill right now, what would it be?
To play the piano. I can play guitar fairly well. I can dabble in the drums, but piano is one of those instruments I feel like I would really love to be able to offer that down the road. And I have the Simply Piano app on my phone. I'm spending $36 a month on it, and I haven't done it for a couple of months now. So that's a good reminder to get back to work.
Do you have a bucket list?
Not really. I feel like I'm living my dreams. I feel like there's, oftentimes my wife gets mad at me because here I am in London and she would be like out exploring and seeing all the things and the sights and kind of going off the beaten paths. And so, when we've traveled anywhere, we did a big European trip a bunch of years ago. And when we were here in London together and she said, what do you want to go do? What do you want to see? And I was like, I don't know. Everything's kind of cool. Like here I am in Camberwell and I'm looking around going, that's a cool looking pub. And I'm equally as intrigued with that pub as I would be with a museum in town. Now that might be blasphemous to say that, but I think for me, yeah, I'm living my bucket list. If I'm being honest, I really think that I am. And there's nothing out there that I feel like I got to do this before I die.
If you could only listen to one song for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Hmm. One sec.
Preferably not that one.
Yeah. One song for the rest of my life. Maybe I haven't listened to it in a while actually. There's a lot of songs on repeat for me. I'm gonna go with Gravity by John Mayer. That song has always been pretty special to me. As much as I may not think John Mayer is the best guy in the world, his music has always moved me, and that song has definitely been one of my tops for many years now.
I'm going to hit you with one of my big questions, and that is, what does being a man mean to you?
Mm, that is a good question. You know, I think I kind of alluded to it earlier about being somebody that people feel safe around. I think hmm, being a man is somebody who could be so comfortable in their own skin that it helps others to be comfortable in theirs. And it's, yeah, the ability to be vulnerable, be strongly vulnerable. I think that's how I aim to be. And Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what comes to mind right now.
Yeah, I asked that to every man I have on the show, actually, and
Mm,
everyone's answer kind of goes in with each other. So it's quite
mm,
nice to hear that.
cool.
It's refreshing.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's because I don't know about you, but growing up, my dad was a macho guy, and he was all about being strong and tough, and you stiff up your lip, you take it on the chin, and you keep moving.
You
And
man up was
yeah,
one that you always
yeah,
heard.
and I just think there was an element that I didn't feel safe to share certain parts of myself around my father because I felt like it was too much emotion if I went there, and I think we're trying to change that now, and yeah, just yeah, grow from what we grew up with.
I
Hmm.
love that about your podcast because it's very open and honest, and it encourages men to talk about things they should be talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the idea of being strong physically and but I want people to feel a softness with me. I think that for me as a man, I don't want to be intimidating. I don't want to be somebody that people can come around and feel like, oh, he's a tough guy. I don't want to mess with him or whatever. I want to be somebody that if they see me, they go, he looks like a good, nice guy. And there's something about being strong but soft that I think is a really wonderful balance.
Hmm.
And I don't always necessarily mean physically strong, but yeah, somewhere in there is that's where I'm aiming to be is strong and soft. Yeah.
What's next for Don Amero?
I have a lot of things going on. My manager of the last 7 years, Lori Brown, she's retiring on July 1st is her final day. I'm leaving the record label I've been with for 7 years on July 1st. So two big major shifts in my life. And then I've got a summer full of shows with the band, a couple of solo shows here and there in my home country in Canada. And then I've got a fall tour I'm working on right now that will share a bunch of new music doing that. And then I'm hoping for 2025 to see me back here over in the UK and in Europe. And Australia's always been on my radar, so I'd like to see that in the books for 2025. So the wheels are turning towards these things right now. But yeah, lots on the go. Possibly another children's book. I've got one sort of birthing at the moment, so I think that might be coming down the line soon too. So yeah, always irons in the fire for sure.
Amazing. Thank you, Don. Loved our chat.
Pleasure, Kev. Thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow at Canada House.
I'll see you there.